He powers off his phone. Completely. Not silenced. Completely off. His company is crashing. His board is screaming. But he looks at his daughter and makes a choice that will change everything. How did a billionaire's world fall apart in one 43-second video? Before we dive in, comment where in the world you are watching from. And don't forget to click subscribe. The video was posted on a Tuesday morning at 6:47 a.m. By Wednesday evening, it had been viewed 47 million times. Sarah sat in her high school bedroom, scrolling through her phone with trembling hands, watching the numbers climb like some kind of cruel countdown timer. The comments kept multiplying, thousands per minute, each one more brutal than the last. She had tagged him. She had tagged her father directly in the caption. 3 words followed by his verified account handle. Absent Father Challenge. Then his name. It was simple, devastating, and it was everywhere. The video itself was only 43 seconds long. Sarah stood in front of her bedroom mirror, her dark brown eyes looking directly at the camera, her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. Behind her, the walls were decorated with college acceptance letters, debate team photos, and achievement certificates. But none of that mattered in the video. All that mattered was what she said. My dad is the CEO of Vertex Technologies, a company worth $47 billion. He's on the Forbes list. He's been featured in Fortune, Wall Street Journal, and Time magazine. He's spoken at Harvard Business School. He's known around the world as one of the most influential men in technology. She paused. Let that sink in. But he's never known what grade I'm in. The camera cut to black for a moment, then came back to her face. He's never asked about my college applications. He's never been to a single soccer game, not one. Even when I scored the winning goal in the state finals. He's never read a single essay I've written. He's never met my boyfriend. He's never attended a school event. Not the debate tournaments where I placed first nationally. Not the science fair where I won a scholarship. Not even my high school graduation last month. Her voice didn't waver. It was steady, almost clinical in its delivery, which made it somehow worse. But he has time to go on vacation to Monaco. He has time to throw parties that cost more than most people's houses. He has time to be in every magazine, at every gala, every charity benefit. He just doesn't have time for me. The final shot was her holding up her phone, showing her followers list. His name was there, verified, blue checkmark and all. But he didn't follow her back. That was the moment that broke people. That was the moment millions of people felt something shift in their chests. A man so successful, so visible, so present everywhere except where it actually mattered. The video ended with text on screen. If you have a parent who shows up, tell them today that you love them. Because mine never learned how. By the time Sarah's father, James Harrison, woke up that Wednesday morning, the video had already been shared by celebrities, journalists, parenting experts, and just regular people scrolling through their feeds. His publicist called him at 6 in the morning, then again at 6:15. At 6:30, she showed up at his penthouse apartment in downtown Manhattan, letting herself in with the key he'd given her years ago for emergencies. She found him in his home office, already on his laptop, already seeing everything. James Harrison was 52 years old, a white man with the kind of face that looked like it had been carved from stone and business deals. His hair was graying at the temples. His eyes were sharp and analytical. The kind of eyes that looked at spreadsheets and market trends the way other people looked at art. He was already showered and dressed in an expensive suit, even though the markets didn't open for hours. His publicist, Caroline, stood in the doorway with her arms crossed. We need to respond. This is a PR nightmare. James didn't look up from the screen. On it, the video was playing for the 100th time. Sarah's face, so much like her mother's had been, stared directly into the camera, into him, into the world. What's the view count? He asked. 47 million as of 20 minutes ago. It's still climbing. Twitter is trending with your name. Instagram is flooded. News outlets are picking it up. TMZ wants a statement. Good Morning America already called. The Today Show is next. Caroline spoke quickly, professionally, the way she always did when there was a crisis. And Reddit is absolutely destroying you. I'm seeing words like heartless, neglectful, privileged, abusive through absence. There's a hashtag now. Absent Billionaire. It's got 2 million posts. James finally turned away from the screen. For a moment, his face showed something other than stone. Something cracked. But he pressed his lips together and it was gone. "Where is she?" he asked. "At home, I assume, with your ex-wife." Caroline's voice softened slightly. She had worked for him for 12 years. She knew about Sarah, had watched the girl grow up in professional emails and occasional mentions, always an afterthought, always secondary to quarterly earnings reports. "She's not answering calls. The school called to check in on her. There are reporters already gathering outside your building. We need to get ahead of this." James stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office. Below, the city was waking up. Millions of people moving through their lives, most of them unaware that his world had just shifted on its axis. Most of them probably didn't care. But some of them had seen his daughter's face. They had heard what she said. They had made a judgment about him based on 43 seconds, and they had decided he was everything she claimed. "Don't respond yet," he said. "Send me everything. Every comment, every article, every post. I want to see it all." Caroline hesitated. "Sir, that's not usually—" "Do it." The tone was final. She left. James sat back down and started reading. He scrolled through thousands of comments, each one a small cut, 1,000 paper cuts that added up to something real and bleeding. One comment stood out. A woman had written, "My father did the same thing to me. He was never there. I'm 35 now and we still don't speak. He missed my entire life while he built his empire. Reading this, I see him in your words. I see the same daughter pain. This man will regret this. But regret won't bring back the years." James had no response to that. He had no response to any of it. Because deep down, underneath the stone face and the business acumen, and the carefully constructed persona of the self-made man, he knew something. He knew that every single word Sarah had said was true. He knew that he had missed her graduation. Not because he had forgotten. He had chosen to attend an investor meeting in Dubai that same day. He knew that he had never been to a single soccer game. He knew that he didn't follow her on social media, even though she followed him, had probably been following him for years, watching his life from a distance. He also knew why he had done these things, or at least, he had convinced himself he knew why. Success required sacrifice. Sacrifice required absence. You didn't build a $47 billion company by being present at school soccer games. You didn't become influential and important by attending high school graduation ceremonies. You climbed the ladder by doing the things that only you could do, the things that mattered on a global scale, not on a personal one. That was the narrative he had constructed. That was the story he told himself every time he chose a business dinner over a family event. Every time his phone had buzzed with a notification about something Sarah had accomplished, and he had put the phone down without responding. Every time he had looked at her college acceptance letters, congratulated her via text message while sitting in a meeting in Singapore. But seeing it laid out like this, seeing his negligence quantified and broadcast to almost 50 million people, made the narrative crumble. It turned out that the things he had told himself weren't a justification. They were an indictment. Sarah's mother, Diane, had known this would happen eventually. Not the viral video specifically, but some kind of reckoning. She had watched her daughter grow up with a father who was present in the technical sense. James paid for everything. He sent checks. He had set up college funds, trust funds, investment accounts. Sarah had the best of everything materially. but materially wasn't the same as actually. Diane had raised their daughter alone, really alone, even though there was a man whose name was on the birth certificate. She had gone to every soccer game. She had read every essay and given feedback. She had driven her to debate tournaments at 5 in the morning. She had helped her study for the SATs. She had been present for every moment that mattered because Sarah's father was too busy building an empire to build a relationship with his own child. When Sarah had come to Diane that Sunday evening with the idea for the video, Diane had said no at first. She had been careful. She had raised her daughter to be conscious of privacy, of boundaries, of not airing family problems publicly. But Sarah had been patient. She had explained that she wasn't doing it for revenge. She was doing it because she needed to be seen. Not by her father necessarily, but by the world. She needed someone, anyone, to acknowledge that his absence had cost her something. That love wasn't measured by money or opportunity. That having a billionaire father meant nothing if that father didn't know who you were. Diane had cried when she watched the video for the first time. Then she had held her daughter and told her she was brave, which was a mother's job even when her heart was breaking. By Wednesday afternoon, the story had evolved beyond Sarah's original video. News outlets had dug up James's history. They found interviews where he talked about being a workaholic, where he joked about forgetting to check email only once a year. They found old social media posts where he talked about the importance of loyalty to your company, to your mission, to your goals. They found photographs of him at galas and benefit events, always alone or with colleagues, never with his daughter. One news outlet did something different. They tracked down Sarah's teachers and asked them about her. A debate coach said Sarah was one of the most brilliant students she had ever taught, that the girl had a gift for rhetoric and persuasion, that she had college coaches offering her full scholarships. An English teacher said Sarah's essays were extraordinarily mature for her age, that she wrote about absence and belonging, and the weight of inherited expectations with a clarity most people don't develop until their 30s. A soccer coach said Sarah was aggressive on the field, in a good way, that she played like she had something to prove, and that moment when she scored the winning goal in the state finals, her teammates had rushed to embrace her. But she had just stood there looking into the crowd like she was searching for something. Or someone. The narrative was shifting. It wasn't just about a neglectful father anymore. It was about a brilliant, accomplished girl who had been searching for validation from a man incapable of giving it. It was about the way success in one area of life could create a total failure in another. It was about the ways that power could isolate a person so completely that they couldn't see what they were losing. James didn't go to the office that Wednesday. For the first time in years, he stayed home. He had emails piling up, conference calls scheduled, meetings that needed his presence. His executive team was probably panicking. The board would be calling. But none of that mattered because his daughter had told 47 million people that he had failed her. And she was right. By Wednesday night, the hashtag #AbsentBillionaire had spawned 100,000 personal stories, people sharing their own experiences of parental absence, of fathers who had prioritized work over their children, of parents who had been too busy to show up. But also stories about the other side, people talking about parents who had sacrificed career advancement to be present, parents who had turned down promotions, left high-paying jobs, reordered their entire lives around the people they loved. These people were held up as examples of what real success looked like. James read thousands of these stories until his eyes burned and his head ached. He read about a mother who had left a corporate law firm because she couldn't miss her son's childhood. She was making half the money now, working at a smaller firm with flexible hours, but her son was in college, and she had memories of his entire life, not just glimpses. He read about a father who had built his own business specifically so he could set his own hours. It meant financial struggles some years, but it also meant he could coach his daughter's soccer team and attend her science competitions. These people weren't famous, They wouldn't show up in Forbes or Fortune. But they had something James didn't have. They had their children. They had relationships. They had presence. James called Diane for the first time in months. She answered on the third ring, and there was a moment of silence where neither of them spoke. "I need to see her," he said finally. "I need to see Sarah." There was another silence. Then Diane said, "She doesn't want to see you right now. She's dealing with a lot." "Of course she is." "I made sure of that," James said, and there was genuine pain in his voice. "Please, just tell her I'm asking." Diane hesitated. She had spent 17 years protecting Sarah from the reality of her father, or at least trying to soften the edges of it. She had told her daughter that Daddy was busy, that he loved her even if he showed it in different ways, that sometimes the people we love make choices we don't understand. She had lied, basically, in the kindest way possible. But Sarah had figured it out anyway. Sarah had always been too smart to believe comforting lies. "I'll tell her," Diane said. "But James, I'm not promising anything." After she hung up, James did something he hadn't done in a very long time. He tried to remember what his daughter looked like when she was 5. He couldn't. He could remember what his company looked like at that point, its valuation, its growth trajectory. But he couldn't picture Sarah's 5-year-old face. He tried to think of a specific memory with her, something concrete and real, a moment they had shared that had mattered. He couldn't find one. There were moments where he had been present physically but absent mentally, scrolling through emails on his phone while she played nearby. There were moments where he had missed entirely, forgotten about promised visits or special occasions because something had come up at work. But a real memory, a genuine moment of connection. He couldn't locate one. The realization of that was somehow worse than anything Sarah had said in her video. It was one thing to neglect your daughter. It was another thing entirely to realize that your negligence had been so complete that you had almost nothing to remember her by. James spent that night making a list of every school event, every accomplishment, every milestone he had missed. His assistant probably could have provided the information easily enough, but he wanted to remember it himself, wanted to prove that he had at least some knowledge of his own daughter's life. The list took hours. By the time he was finished, it filled 20 pages. By Thursday morning, news outlets were starting to look for Sarah directly. They wanted her to come on their shows, to do interviews, to capitalize on the moment. Entertainment news, serious news. Everyone wanted a piece of the story. Some outlets tried to make it more sensational than it was, running headlines like, "Billionaire's daughter destroys him online," or "CEO exposed by teenage daughter's brutal video." But others were more thoughtful. There was one article in a major magazine that looked at the systemic problem of success and absence, that examined how modern capitalism had created a culture where devotion to work was seen as noble, even when it sacrificed fundamental human relationships. There was another piece that interviewed child psychologists about the long-term effects of parental absence, about attachment and development, and the ways that money couldn't substitute for presence. By Thursday afternoon, James's company had issued an official statement on his behalf. His publicist had written it, approved it, and released it to the press. It was carefully worded, full of phrases like taking time for personal reflection, and prioritizing family, and learning important lessons. It said nothing real. It said nothing true. It was the kind of statement a CEO would make when they needed to manage a crisis, but had no genuine internal work to do. James read it and felt sick. He called his publicist and told her to take it down. "It's already out there," Caroline said. "Every news outlet has it." "Then issue another statement. The real one. Tell them I was wrong. Tell them my daughter was right." Caroline was silent for a long moment. "Sir, that's not the strategy we discussed. We agreed on a measured response. something that acknowledges concerns without admitting fault. "I'm admitting fault," James said. "My daughter told the truth. I'm going to tell it too." He hung up before Caroline could argue further. He spent the rest of Thursday writing a statement himself. He threw away 3 versions before he got something that felt true. The final version was short. It said, "My daughter was right. I have been absent. Not because I had to be, but because I chose to be. I prioritized my career over my relationship with her, and I did this consistently throughout her childhood and teenage years. I justified it to myself with narratives about success and sacrifice, but those narratives don't hold up. Success that costs you your relationship with your child isn't success. It's failure wearing an expensive suit. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect for this statement to fix anything. But I wanted to acknowledge that she was brave to tell the truth, and that truth needed to be told. I failed my daughter. Not once. Repeatedly. That's the only statement I have to make." He sent it to Caroline and told her to release it immediately. She called back within seconds, panicking. "You can't say that. You're admitting to emotional negligence. There's potential legal implications. Your ex-wife could use this against you." "Good," James said. "She should. I deserve whatever comes." By Friday morning, his statement had been read by over 100 million people. It had been screenshotted and shared and reposted and analyzed. Some people praised his honesty. Others said it wasn't enough, that words meant nothing without action. Some commenters pointed out that he was getting credit for apologizing while Sarah had never asked him to apologize, that the attention was shifting toward him when the original story had been about her experience. That criticism stuck with him because it was true. Even his attempt to take responsibility was somehow making it about himself. The narrative had become about his redemption arc, rather than about Sarah's pain. He realized that he couldn't fix that from here. He couldn't manage his way out of this. He couldn't do a series of interviews and rehabilitation and rebranding and make it okay. The only thing he could do was actually change. Actually be different. Actually be present for his daughter in a meaningful way going forward. But first he had to see her. He had to face her. He had to hear from her directly what his absence had cost. Friday afternoon, he drove to the house in the suburbs where Sarah and Diane lived. It was a nice house, not ostentatious, not the kind of place a billionaire's ex-wife would typically live. Diane had asked him years ago not to buy her anything too expensive, that she wanted to raise Sarah in a normal environment, that too much privilege too early had made too many children ungrateful or dysfunctional. He had respected that, had set up the college fund instead, had paid the bills, but had let Diane choose the setting where their daughter grew up. Now pulling into the driveway, he was grateful for that choice. The house was real. The neighborhood was real. Sarah had grown up in reality, instead of in the bubble of extreme wealth. He wasn't sure if that made his failure worse or better. Before he could knock on the door, Diane opened it. She looked tired, older than when he had last really looked at her. There were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. Or maybe they had always been there and he had just never paid attention. She was wearing jeans and a sweater, and she looked at him with an expression that was neither warm nor hostile. It was just sad. "She's in her room," Diane said. "She doesn't want to see you, but I told her you were coming anyway." "Is she angry?" James asked. "I would be." "Mostly she's tired," Diane said. "She's tired of explaining that she loves you and hates your choices. She's tired of having to pick between her feelings about you as a father and her feelings about you as a person. She's tired of all of this being public now." James nodded. None of that was surprising. He deserved it all. He walked up the stairs to Sarah's room, his heart pounding like it did before a major business presentation. Except nothing he had done in business had ever mattered this much. He knocked on the door. For a long moment there was no answer. Then a voice that sounded like Diane's voice but harder, older. Come in. Sarah was sitting on her bed, her laptop open in front of her. She was presumably scrolling through the comments on her video, which had now topped 100 million views. She was wearing a sweatshirt that said Yale University, her college choice, a decision she had probably made and announced somewhere he hadn't been paying attention. She looked at him for a moment without saying anything. Then she closed her laptop. "Hi, Dad," she said, and there was something in the way she said it that was more devastating than anger would have been. It was resignation. It was the sound of a daughter who had already let go of the idea that her father was someone she needed anything from. "Hi," James said. He didn't know what else to say. He was a man who dealt in words, who had built an empire on his ability to speak and persuade. But right now, words seemed impossibly inadequate. "Your video was very well made," he said, which was possibly the worst thing he could have said. Sarah looked at him like he had just said something incomprehensibly stupid. "That's your response? You're critiquing my video?" "No, James started, but then he stopped and took a breath. He had been about to explain what he meant, to try to manage the situation with words and clarifications. Instead, he sat down on the chair across from her bed. "I don't know how to do this," he said. "I'm going to say the wrong things, probably. I'm going to try to explain myself, and it's going to sound like excuses. So maybe I should just listen instead." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Do you know how many times I tried to tell you things? How many times I came home from school wanting to talk to you about something and you were in a meeting or on a call?" "No," James said, "but I suspect a lot." "It was a lot," Sarah confirmed. "There was this one time. I was in 8th grade. I had just found out I had made the soccer team. I was so excited. I called your office and asked if I could talk to you. Your secretary said you were in a meeting. I called back 3 more times that day. Finally, I just gave up." She looked at him. "You texted me congratulations that night. You texted me, like I had sent you a funny meme." "Sarah," James started. "Let me finish," she said. "Because I have a lot of finishing to do and I've been waiting a long time." So he listened. She talked for over an hour. She talked about moments, small and large, where she had needed him and he wasn't there. She talked about how she had learned not to expect him, how by high school she had made a policy of not even telling him about her achievements, because the disappointment of his non-response hurt worse than his absence. She talked about watching her friends' parents come to their games, their recitals, their presentations, and the way she had felt a specific kind of loneliness about that. She talked about how she had started the video not because she was angry, but because she needed someone to know that his absence had been a presence in her life, that it had shaped her in specific ways. She talked about how even now, she was aware that somewhere inside her, she was still waiting for him to show up, to prove her wrong, to be the father she needed. And how that hope was the most painful part of all because she knew it probably wouldn't change anything. James listened to all of it and didn't interrupt. He felt something break inside him, something that had been held together by ignorance and justification and the wall between himself and his own emotions. By the time Sarah finished, they were both crying. James hadn't cried since he was a child. He had trained himself not to, had cultivated an image of control and strength that didn't include tears. But now they came freely, genuinely, without performance. "I'm sorry," he said when he could speak. "That's not enough, but I am." "I know you're sorry," Sarah said, and her voice had softened slightly. "I don't think you're a bad person. I think you're someone who got very focused on one thing and forgot to focus on anything else. And I think you're going to keep being who you are, even after this blows over." "I don't want to," James said. "I want to change." "Do you?" Sarah asked. "Or do you want to feel like you changed? Because those are 2 very different things." The question hung between them, unanswerable in the moment. Before James could try, his phone buzzed. Then again, and again. He ignored it. But Sarah had seen his face shift toward the buzzing. "You should check that," she said. "I'm not checking my phone," James said. "Nothing is more important than this conversation." "That's what you always say," Sarah said. "And then something is more important. It's like, actually check it. Don't sit here pretending you're not thinking about what's happening in your company or how this is affecting your stock price." James hesitated, then pulled out his phone. 53 missed calls, messages from his executive team, his board chairman, several board members, a notification that his company's stock had dropped 5% on the news cycle related to the viral video and his statement. There was a message from his COO saying there was an emergency board meeting scheduled for that evening. Everything was falling apart or transforming or something was happening, and his company was in chaos. He looked at Sarah. She was watching him, and he could see her resigning herself to the inevitable. He could see the confirmation in her face that he was going to leave, that he always left, that he couldn't stay in this moment because somewhere else was demanding his attention. For a moment that felt like a lifetime, James sat with that choice. He could go. He could put out the fires. He could try to manage the crisis. Or he could put the phone down and stay here with his daughter. He powered off the phone, not silenced it, not put it on Do Not Disturb, actually turned it completely off. "I'm not leaving," he said. Sarah looked shocked. "What about the board meeting?" "They can have a meeting without me. They're all smart people. They can figure things out for an evening." "Your stock price. We'll do what it does. We've weathered worse." He turned the phone off and set it on the dresser. He turned back to Sarah. "I'm listening, and I'm staying. And if this makes my company suffer, then it should suffer. Because my company has been exactly what's wrong with my priorities." Sarah looked at him for a long moment. And for the first time, something like hope flickered across her face. It was fragile, uncertain, but it was there. "Really?" she asked. James nodded. "Really. Tell me something. Tell me what you're excited about. Tell me about Yale. Tell me about anything. I want to know my daughter." And so, for the first time in years, James Harrison sat with his daughter and actually listened to her talk about her life. And Sarah, cautiously, carefully, started talking. Sarah talked for hours. She talked about Yale, about how she had gotten an early decision, about her debate team that had placed second at nationals, about the boyfriend whose name was Marcus and who was going to Syracuse on a sports scholarship, about the fact that she liked advanced mathematics more than most people, about her dreams of going to law school eventually, about how she had considered not going to college at all because she was tired of trying to prove herself. She talked about the moment she decided to make the video, how she had been scrolling through social media one night and seen all these posts about absent fathers and toxic masculinity in corporate culture, and how she had realized that her pain wasn't unique, but that maybe her story could matter because her father was famous enough that people would listen. She talked about how terrified she had been to post it, how she had almost deleted it 3 times before actually hitting send, how she had expected maybe a few thousand views, maybe her friends would see it, and then it had exploded beyond anything she could have imagined. As she talked, James watched his daughter, really watched her, for what felt like the first time in her life. He noticed the way her eyes lit up when she talked about something she cared about, the way her hands moved when she was passionate, the specific cadence of her voice that was nothing like his, which was all Diane. He noticed that she was brilliant and articulate and funny and warm, and everything he had missed out on knowing. By the time Sarah finished talking, it was after midnight. Diane had come up twice to check if they needed anything, and both times James had seen the shock on her face to find them still talking, still engaged, still together. When Sarah finally yawned, James realized how exhausted she looked. He realized that she had been dealing with 100 million people watching her pain, with reporters calling, with her life suddenly being a public spectacle. "We should let you sleep," he said. Sarah nodded, but before he could stand, she said, "Will you still be here in the morning?" James felt something shift in his chest. It was a simple question, but it carried the weight of every broken promise, every missed event, every time he had said he would do something and then didn't. "Yes," he said. "I'm staying. I'm going to keep staying." Sarah fell asleep around 1 a.m., her head resting against the pillow, her breathing eventually slowing into deep sleep. James stayed for another hour, just watching her, memorizing this moment, making sure it was real. Then he went downstairs and found Diane in the kitchen making tea. She looked at him with cautious surprise. "You're still here," she said. "I'm staying," James replied. "Not just tonight. I'm staying. In her life. I'm changing things." Diane studied him for a long moment, and he could see all the years of disappointment in her eyes. All the time she had had to be strong for both of them. "I hope so," she said finally. "She deserves better than what she's gotten." "I know," James said, "and I'm going to do better." Over the next few weeks, James transformed his life in ways that shocked almost everyone. First, he stepped back from his role as CEO of Vertex Technologies. Not completely. He didn't abandon the company, but he brought in his COO as co-chief executive and moved himself to a position where he was involved in strategic decisions, but not managing the day-to-day crisis. His board was shocked. The news media was shocked. Wall Street initially reacted negatively, the stock dipping another 3% when the announcement was made. But something interesting happened after that. The stock stabilized, then actually started to climb. Other CEOs, fathers especially, started talking about their own struggles with balance. A few followed his example and made changes in their own lives. Articles started appearing with titles like, "The Billionaire Who Chose His Daughter," and "What If We Measured Success Differently?" He hired a therapist and started actually processing the reasons why he had chosen his work over his family. The therapist helped him see that his drive for success had come from a place of deep insecurity, from a childhood where his own father had criticized him constantly, where love felt conditional on achievement. He had internalized that message and lived by it his entire life, and then had passed it on to his daughter through absence. Understanding that didn't fix it, but it helped him see that it was a choice, that it had been a choice all along, and that he could make different choices going forward. He set boundaries with his company. He took weekends off, actually off, not checking emails. He started attending Sarah's remaining senior year events. She had a debate competition in Boston and he went, driving up early so he could have lunch with her before the event. He watched her destroy the competition, watched her opponents unable to keep up with her rhetoric, watched her win first place. Afterward, he hugged her in front of everyone, not caring who saw, not worrying about his image. He just held his daughter and told her how proud he was. Sarah cried, which she rarely did in public, and said, "I can't believe you came." And James had to hold back his own tears, because that was the thing that broke his heart the most. The fact that it was shocking for her father to show up for something important to her. He started having dinner with Sarah and Diane twice a week, just the three of them, phones off, no work talk. Diane was cautious at first, waiting for him to slip back into old patterns. But as weeks turned into months, she began to believe that this change was real. He attended Sarah's graduation, sitting in the front row, camera ready, his chest bursting with pride. When she gave her valedictorian speech, she thanked her mother for always being there, thanked her teachers, thanked her friends, and then she paused. She looked directly at her father and said, "And I want to thank my dad for finally showing up. It took a viral video, but he figured it out. If there's someone in your life who's not showing up the way they should, I hope this is your sign to have the hard conversation. I hope this is your sign to ask for what you need." because it's never too late to change. It's never too late to show up. The entire auditorium erupted in applause. James was openly crying now, not caring who saw, not caring about his image. This was his daughter. This was his brilliant, brave, extraordinary daughter, and he got to be here for it. That night after the graduation party, James and Sarah sat on the back porch of the house where she had grown up. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Sarah had a blanket wrapped around her shoulders and was holding a cup of hot chocolate, even though it was warm outside, the kind of thing James was just now learning about her. These small, specific preferences that made her who she was. "I want to tell you something," Sarah said, "and I need you to not interpret it as forgiveness for everything." James nodded. He had learned, through therapy and through listening to his daughter, that apologies and conversations weren't linear, that healing wasn't something that could be rushed or completed in a certain amount of time. "Okay," he said. "What is it?" "I'm proud of you," Sarah said. "Not because you changed everything overnight. I'm proud of you because you listened. You actually listened to what I said, and instead of defending yourself or making excuses or trying to manage the situation, you just heard me. And then you changed. I don't know if that means we'll fix everything between us, but it means something. It means you care enough to try." James reached over and took her hand. They sat like that for a long time, not speaking, just present with each other. It was simple and quiet, and it felt like everything. Over the summer before Sarah left for Yale, James rented a small cabin in the mountains of Vermont. He took Sarah and Diane, and they spent 3 weeks there without any agenda, without any pressure. They hiked. They cooked together. They played board games and watched movies, and had long conversations about life and dreams, and what Sarah wanted to do with her future. James told Sarah about his own childhood, about his father, about the ways he had tried to overcompensate for his own losses by building an empire. Sarah listened the way he had learned to listen, without judgment, just present. One night Sarah asked him, "Do you regret not being there?" James took a moment before answering, because it was important to be honest. "I regret it deeply," he said. "I regret every moment I missed. I regret that you had to make a viral video for me to finally understand what was happening. But I'm grateful, in a weird way, that it happened. Because otherwise I might have gone my whole life without really knowing you. And that would have been the biggest loss of all." Sarah nodded. "I'm glad you're here now," she said. "I really am." When it came time to move Sarah into her dorm at Yale, James took a week off from work. He and Diane drove with Sarah, helped her set up her room, met her roommate, bought her supplies she needed. When it was time to leave, Sarah hugged James for a long time. "Call me," she said. "I will," James promised. "Every week. And I want to come visit, if that's okay." "Of course it's okay," Sarah said. "I want you to come." He did visit. Multiple times that first semester. He came to her debate competitions. He took her and her roommate to dinner in New Haven. He attended a campus event where she was speaking about her viral video and its aftermath, about the importance of vulnerable conversations between parents and children. She was articulate and poised and beautiful, and everything he had missed out on helping her become. He realized, watching her speak, that she hadn't needed him to become this person. She had become this person in spite of his absence, with her mother's steady love and support, and her own incredible resilience. But now he got to be part of her life going forward. Now he got to watch her become even more, to support her dreams, to be someone she could rely on. That changed something for him. It removed the burden of trying to fix the past or make up for lost time. It just let him be present for what was to come. A year after the viral video, James was invited to speak at a business conference. The organizers asked if he would be willing to do a panel about work-life balance and redefining success. He said yes, but with a caveat. He wanted his daughter to be part of the panel. He wanted her to tell her story directly to other CEOs and business leaders. Sarah agreed, somewhat nervously, but she prepared thoroughly. The panel was called Reclaiming Success: What Business Leaders Need to Know, and it took place in a packed auditorium with thousands watching via live stream. James sat in one chair, Sarah in another, with a moderator between them. The moderator opened by having James tell his story from his perspective, and he talked about how he had prioritized his company over his family, how he had convinced himself that it was necessary, how the wake-up call from his daughter had changed everything. Then Sarah told her story, about growing up with a father who was present in every magazine but absent in her life, about the moment she decided to make the video, about what it meant to finally have her father actually show up. And then they had a conversation on stage, with thousands of people listening. Sarah asked him hard questions about why he had thought success was more important than family. James answered honestly, vulnerably, in ways that CEOs aren't usually willing to answer. He talked about his own father, about the ways pain gets passed down, about the choices he had made, and how he was trying to do better. And Sarah listened, the way she had taught him to listen, with openness and without judgment, but also without letting him off the hook. When it was time for audience questions, a woman stood up and said, "I'm a CEO. I'm a father of two. Watching what happened with you and your daughter made me take a hard look at my own life. I started doing exactly what you did, stepping back, showing up for my kids. It's been transformative. I wanted to thank you both for being brave enough to have this conversation publicly." Another man stood up and said he had made the decision to leave his job as a CFO and take a position with better hours so he could be more present for his family. Another woman said she had been inspired to have a difficult conversation with her own father about his absence in her life. Another man said he had been inspired to become more involved with his children, instead of leaving it all to his wife. One by one, people shared stories of how the video and now this conversation had changed their lives. By the end of the panel, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. James and Sarah sat backstage afterward, processing what had just happened. "Did you feel that?" Sarah asked. James nodded. "I think we just changed something," he said. "Something bigger than us." The video of their panel was uploaded that night, and by morning it had over 30 million views. This time, the comments were different from the original viral video. People were hopeful. People were talking about what it meant to redefine success, to value relationships over achievement, to believe that change was possible. News outlets picked it up with headlines like, "Father and daughter inspire global conversation about success and meaning," and "Billionaire CEO and daughter's viral moment sparks movement." But the thing that James noticed most was that it wasn't about judgment anymore. It wasn't about whether he was good or bad, whether Sarah was brave or attention-seeking. It was about the possibility of change, the hope that people could do better, that it was never too late to show up for the people who mattered. Years passed. Sarah graduated from Yale with honors and was accepted to Harvard Law School. James attended her graduation and gave himself permission to feel proud, without also feeling guilty about all the years he had missed. He was present for this ending, for this beginning. That was enough. He couldn't change the past, but he could be part of the future. Sarah went to law school and eventually became a family law attorney, specializing in cases where parent-child relationships had been damaged by neglect or absence. She said she wanted to help other families navigate what she and her father had navigated, to help them find their way back to each other. James supported her through law school, coming to visit, helping her study, being there when she was stressed or overwhelmed. They developed a real relationship, not the relationship of a father and daughter, but a relationship between two people who respected each other and enjoyed each other's company. James even cut his work hours further, taking on an advisory role at his company while stepping completely away from day-to-day operations. He used his newfound time to mentor young entrepreneurs, many of whom were struggling with the same work-life balance issues he had struggled with. He started a foundation dedicated to helping children of high-powered executives navigate complex family dynamics. The foundation provided counseling services, educational resources, and support groups. Sarah helped develop the curriculum, drawing on her own experience and her education in family law and psychology. Together, they created something meaningful, something that helped thousands of families. 5 years after the original viral video, James and Sarah were invited to speak at another conference, this time focused on corporate wellness and family dynamics. They had done dozens of similar speaking engagements in the years between, but this one felt special because it was hosted by a major university, and the proceeds were going to their foundation. They decided to do a different kind of panel this time. Instead of just talking, they did what was called a live conversation, where they sat in comfortable chairs and had a genuine dialogue in front of an audience. A moderator asked them about their journey, and they talked openly about what had changed, what hadn't, how their relationship was now versus what it had been. Sarah was honest that she still sometimes felt anger about the years she had lost, that it would never be completely healed. But she was also honest that her father had genuinely changed, that he wasn't perfect, that he sometimes slipped into old patterns of overwork, but that he caught himself now and adjusted. James was honest about how much work it had taken to truly understand what he had done, how long therapy had lasted, how many conversations it had taken to really comprehend the pain his absence had caused. He talked about how he still struggled sometimes with the desire to throw himself into work, how success was seductive, and how it was easy to fall back into old patterns. But he talked about how his relationship with his daughter was worth infinitely more than any business achievement. He talked about how true success was measured by love, by presence, by showing up for the people who mattered. By this time, the original viral video had accumulated over 200 million views. It had spawned thousands of other videos, with other people telling their own stories of parental absence, corporate greed, misplaced priorities. It had become part of the cultural conversation about what success meant and how we defined it. Universities were using the video in business ethics classes. Corporate training programs were referencing it. Marriage counselors and family therapists were showing it to couples and families as a way to start difficult conversations. But the most important thing, to James and Sarah, was what had happened between the two of them. They had gone from a broken relationship built on absence and unmet needs to a real relationship built on presence and genuine care. It wasn't perfect. Family relationships rarely were. But it was real, and it was theirs. And it had been worth every difficult moment of therapy and conversation and transformation. On Sarah's 25th birthday, James threw her a party at his house. He had moved out of his Manhattan penthouse and bought a house in Connecticut, closer to where Diane lived, closer to where Sarah had grown up. The party was small, just close friends and family, nothing extravagant, nothing that screamed billionaire. There was good food and good wine and laughter and genuine connection. As the evening was winding down, James asked Sarah if they could talk privately on the deck. They sat in chairs overlooking the garden, and James gave his daughter a small box. Inside was a watch, a simple, elegant watch with an inscription on the back. "Every second counts. I love you, Dad." Sarah put the watch on and started to cry. "I remember," she said, "when I thought you didn't even know my birthday was coming up. I remember thinking that I would probably get a check, maybe a text message. Definitely nothing personal." "And now?" James asked. "Now I know you're coming to my birthday party in person," Sarah said. "Now I know you care about the details of my life. Now I know that I matter to you." James reached over and took his daughter's hand. "You always mattered," he said. "I just didn't know how to show it until you forced me to learn." They sat like that for a long time, watching the sun set, enjoying each other's company, needing no words. This was what success looked like, James thought. Not a fancy watch, not a business empire, not magazine covers or board meetings. This was it. His daughter's hand in his. The quiet peace of shared understanding. The knowledge that he had been given a second chance and he had taken it. The video that changed everything had been posted on a Tuesday morning. But the real change had happened in the conversations that followed, in the choices to listen, in the decision to be present, in the commitment to show up. And that change had saved not just his relationship with his daughter, but something deeper, something essential that had almost been lost forever. Years later, when journalists would ask James about what that moment had felt like, being exposed so publicly, having his failures broadcast to millions of people, he would always answer the same way. "It was the best thing that ever happened to me," he would say, "because it forced me to wake up, because it gave me a reason to change that I couldn't ignore, because it led me back to my daughter, and that changed everything." And when they asked Sarah, she would smile and say, "My video wasn't meant to hurt him. It was meant to be heard." And he heard it. And that's what mattered. That's what changed everything. They had both learned, through that process, that sometimes the hardest conversations led to the most meaningful transformations. That sometimes you had to air your pain publicly before you could heal it privately. That sometimes the most important victories in life had nothing to do with business, and everything to do with love. The video kept accumulating views, kept inspiring conversations, kept changing lives. And James and Sarah kept doing their work, helping other families bridge gaps, helping other fathers and daughters and parents and children find their way back to each other. They had turned their pain into purpose, their failure into a foundation for helping others. And in doing so, they had created something more valuable than any empire. They had created a second chance at family. Finally, we've reached the end of this story. I'm extremely happy that you've made it this far. Thank you very much for watching. Comment below what you thought and what was the best or worst part. Don't forget to subscribe. Until next time.